Good evening and welcome. 135 and 27 people. Yo, too many. I think we'll have enough room in the classroom for all of you. I trust you can hear me clearly. Your mics have been enabled, so you can unmute and talk to me if you got a question or a comment. And yeah, we'll just wait a minute or two till 6:30, then I'll start sharing my screen. In the meantime, any comments, questions? If you're shy, you can put it in the chat. Have you had assignments? Anybody got the assignments back? No. Nobody wants to say anything? Okay, no problem. Deborah, Anneline, Prince, Sandesh. Oh, you did? Okay. I trust you're happy with your mark, Sandesh. Yes, okay. Right. Okay, we've got more people. All 11 of you. All okay? No questions, anybody? What time do you all make it? Mine was still short of 6:30. I don't want to shortchange anybody who might join late. No. Beauty, Anneline, Chris, Deborah, Janet, Victor, Leah. No, nobody wants to talk to me. Okay, just tell me in the chat if the audio is okay. Thank you, Victor. Okay, Yasin and student. Okay, we got an original name, yeah, student. Hello, student. I'd like to know your name.
Hello, Steve, how are you?
Oh, okay.
It's I haven't seen that. I haven't changed that. I'll definitely correct it.
No problem. And your name is?
Sonwabo.
Sonabwe. Okay, no problem.
Okay,
You
sir.
know, I have to practice your names because I have to read your names out at graduation, but that will only be next year. But I have
Yes,
to
sir.
start practicing from now. So don't let
Okay,
me
I'll
down.
def
Make sure you get to graduation. That means you have to pass and finish your degree this year.
yeah,
Or
definitely.
maybe I'll see you all in my postgraduate class, postgraduate diploma in management. There's a
Okay.
module called general management. Maybe I'll see you all in that class, God willing. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks again. Let me share my screen and we can get the show on the road. Become entrepreneurship. Where are you? There you go. Okay. Okay, so if you got a question or a comment, please just simply unmute and talk to me. I might not be able to see your hand if you put your hand up. 22 people. I'm very happy. Thought there'll be more, but anyway, no problem with that. Okay, so BCom Entrepreneurship 301. And if you don't know by now, or if you're here for the first time, my name is Osman Sidat. And yeah, the module is entrepreneurship. If you're in the wrong webinar, stick around. You might get some pearls of wisdom. Good evening again and welcome. And a word from our sponsor, Region Connect for Jobs. And you are reminded about rule number 1, which is about being familiar with the contents of this study guide or module or whatever you want to call it. 20 chapters. I tell you once again, sounds boring now, that these are all integrated. You're not going to get questions on chapter 2, chapter 4, chapter 6, or whatever. Okay? You need to integrate it. However, we have been going through the chapters so that there's some order in our in the webinars. Today is the third webinar. The last time we finished buying a franchise and the business, no, we finished up to growth strategies and options, or did we? No. Managing growth. No. We got to buying a franchise. We stopped at buying a franchise. So while I'm not following this closely, it's for you to read. I'm sort of keeping to that pattern. However, most of the information in my slides is not from the study guide. It's simply just put together in terms of the topic, and you are requested to also read the study guide or the modules or whatever it is that you have on the portal. Okay, so let's start with this thing about
You had one phone.
Okay, mute please. Paths to entrepreneurship. So again, okay, somebody needs to mute, please. Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay. All right, the culprit has stopped as muted. Okay, no problem. Let me just get back to my slide. All right, so we're talking about the so-called paths to entrepreneurship. This can be about by starting your own business, buying an existing business, entering the family business, franchising, or being what we call an intrapreneur. An intrapreneur is somebody who practices entrepreneurial skills, if you want, or displays entrepreneurial competences within an organization. It's actually the last chapter called Corporate Entrepreneurship. We'll get to it then. So let's talk about buying an existing business. These would be the steps. Again, finding the business, due diligence, valuing the business, securing financing, negotiate, and finalize. Okay. Again, this is not rocket science, nothing too serious. You do it anyway without having to know it. What are the advantages of buying an existing business? Yeah, so there are risks as well as advantages or benefits, if you want. Mainly is that you got an established business, so the startup costs tend to be lower, and there's an existing customer base, and therefore, compared to starting a new business, it generally involves less risk. However, if the business has been tainted in some way, or if the business has the previous owner perhaps developed a bit of an unhealthy reputation, that might come back to haunt you. Okay, they're not going to tell you when they sell you the business, well, actually, we've lost customers, etc. But generally speaking, there are reduced risks relating to buying an existing business. And that's what we're saying again, more financial reward, greater likelihood of success, an established supply chain. Again, because if you're seeking financing, for example, you've got a history. You might have previous financial statements, etc., that was used when you bought the business to value the business, etc. Again, that might help in terms of achieving finance as opposed to a startup. The disadvantages is that first one, inherited issues. It's a high initial investment. For example, if you're buying an existing business, you can't really bootstrap. Okay? That initial investment can be substantial, plus the legal fees, etc. There might be hidden problems, even though you did a due diligence. And there's a reliance on the so-called previous owner in terms of expertise that a new owner might have to now navigate. So it's a high cost, dated processes and technology, existing company reputation, and the culture. It might even extend to having staff that perhaps you would not ordinarily employ, but because you bought the business, you have to take the staff with you, so to speak. How do you determine the value of a business? Again, couple of ways. The asset approach, in other words, the book value, taking the assets, the liabilities from the assets in terms of the statement of financial position or balance sheet. The liquidation value, in other words, if you sold all the assets and paid the liabilities or paid the credits, that would be the value that you left over. Okay? If you sold all the assets and paid all the debts, the liquidation value, or the asset value, the value of all the business assets, including intangible and tangible and intangible assets. Then you can use the discounted cash flow, projecting future cash flow back to its present value. Some of you might know of that if you're doing accounting, but it's really about saying what is the present value of the future projected cash flows. You can talk about how earnings are capitalized, and then this whole thing about what they call EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. It's used as a proxy, and you have a multiple. So an EBITDA multiple then will tell you this is what this business is worth or valued. And so that's the asset approach, the income approach, the market approach, again, using multiples of revenue, earnings, or EBITDA based on what other companies, comparable companies, have been sold for or purchased or whatever. And then comparing it with other companies that have been acquired. That's a market approach. And then you can talk about entry cost, the value of the enterprise, including the so-called intangible assets like goodwill, etc. And then what we call market capitalization, the share price multiplied by the number of outstanding shares. That's also a measure of value. So we hear this term of this company has a market cap. Standard Bank has a market capitalization of, I don't know how many billions or whatever. That's just an insight into what the business is worth. So moving on, then we talk about managing growth of an entrepreneurial venture. So we need to plan strategically. We need to manage, build a strong team, foster innovation, financial discipline, operational efficiency, and a clear vision. So we can increase our profits by growing the business, most revenue, etc. We can also do cost cutting, operational efficiency. And in any case, the focus is on growth, but managing the growth so that it doesn't become overly burdensome financially. And that requires, it's really about strategic management. So you see again the so-called growth phases of an entrepreneurial venture. This comes from the Harvard Business Review, hbr.org, 1983. I left the reference there deliberately. I put the reference in deliberately. As you can see, age of organization spelled with a Z. So that will tell you that's not a local thing. But you see, so this article then talked about the growth phases, growing through creativity, through direction, through delegation, through coordination, and then through collaboration. And at each time there's a crisis, leadership crisis, autonomy, control, red tape, because as businesses grow, they become more, if you want, bureaucratic. You need controls, you need processes, you need policies. And often that goes against the grain of an entrepreneurial venture, right? That focuses on innovation and things like that. So again, you see growth through delegation. At some point, the business has to be run by other people. The entrepreneur can't do everything himself or herself, so certain things has to be delegated. And that also talks about growing the business through coordination, through collaboration. So we talk about the stages of growth from the startup or pre-startup, the incubation, the growth stage, maturity, and decline. And again, the decline can be arrested, what we might call transformation or rejuvenation, some kind of change. Now, this is a general thing. It doesn't necessarily apply to all. In some instances, it might go up like this and then really decline rapidly. So this is a general stage of venture growth. And the dynamics of that is that you need strategic growth, right? Through performance, you get financial growth, which provides the resources for that strategic growth. It allows us to accumulate assets, that structural growth, which executes the strategic growth, and organizational growth using the assets, growing the organization, supports strategic growth and gives direction to the strategic growth. So this is just about the dynamics of growth. And you essentially got four options. New products existing products in existing markets. We talk of market penetration. Existing products in new markets, market development. New products in existing markets is product development. And new products in new markets could be innovation and diversification. Okay, so again, you can talk about a growth strategy and try and link this up to what you might have learned or might be doing in Business Management 3. Those of you who are doing Business Management 3, and even in international business, because you see the links. So, market development, market penetration, growing your market share, product development, otherwise diversification. So this is often referred to as the Ansoff matrix. Again, market penetration, market development, product development, diversification. Interestingly, you see where the risk is. As you can see, the risk is lower in terms of your present products in future markets. In your present market. That's your comfort zone, so to speak. When you venture into using future products in your present market, the risk tends to get higher. Similarly, when you talk about your present products in your in your future markets, again, it goes from low to high, as you see. And diversification, new products, new markets, seriously risky if you want. So that takes us to how do we know that we are performing well? And levels of what we might call failure. Now you might think that's a bit funny. If you look at these 5 levels, at the top is venture is performing well, at the bottom is venture that failed. So how can venture be performing well be regarded as a level of failure? So it's a level of failure in the sense that when things are going good, it often leads to complacency. Complacency in terms of the fact that, hey, things are all right, no problem, revenue is growing or whatever, we're getting the sales, we're busier than ever, etc. That is often the time when there might be what we call strategic drift, or we're moving over. Then the next level is underperforming, a venture that is performing, but perhaps not to its potential. Then there might be some distress in the venture. Remember, these are levels of failure. Then some form of crisis, the venture in crisis, and then ultimately the venture that failed. Levels of failure. Now, what are some of the issues in terms of business success or failure? It could be attitude and motivation, positioning. Where are we positioning ourselves as an organization, our products and our services? What is our business model? What kind of share of the market do we have? And what is the level of our sales? And then often the most important one, the cash flow, the liquidity of our business. So we put those 5 things there again: performs well, underperforms, distress, crisis, failure. And you see interlinked with the economic model, the sales and demand, cash flow and financing, strategic positioning, attitudes and motivation. So poor attitude or poor motivation might lead us to underperform. And there's a mathematical formula there. P is equal to the sum of N into S minus C minus F. You can work that out. But again, don't worry too much about the formula. Look at not the principle, but look at the concept in terms of these issues. So what are some of the signs of distress? Strategic issues, management issues, planning and financial systems, practices, controls, and of course, environmental issues, which might indicate an organization in distress. They're in the middle. And the causes, again, decline in your margins, decline in your net margins, cash flows being irregular, your value propositions. What is your unique value proposition? Can you sustain your competitive advantage? Decrease in sales, cash flow issues, which I spoke about just now, levels of confidence dropping, and sometimes key employees leaving. That would be the causes of distress. And then we get to failure. So I got this from a particular source, but don't worry too much about the stats. But remember, for every successful sort of entrepreneurial story that we hear, there could be probably, in my view, about 8 or 9 or 10 failures. We don't hear too much of the failures. This I found, again, a high startup failure rate. 70% to 80% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years. And because small and medium enterprises are so important, okay, we have to look at why they fail. What is the high failure rate to? In South African context, you see load shedding, high interest rate, rising cost of fuel, etc., as we're having now. So business failure occurs when the company ceases operations because it cannot generate revenue to cover its expenses or meet its debts. It can no longer sustain itself financially and is forced to shut down. So what are the reasons for that? Poor financial management, lack of a solid business plan, etc., etc. Weak leadership. So here we go again. Financial inability, various factors, poor management, financial mismanagement, theft, corruption, for example, impact, job losses, economic disruption, damage to the entrepreneur's reputation. Specific causes, financial issues, lack of planning, ignoring customer needs, lacking innovation, you're not being competitive. And then external factors. Well, the price of petrol goes up all of a sudden, changes in regulations, the country is suffering, shift in consumer preferences, beyond our control sometimes, most times, but certainly a cause of failure. So we see again, the goals are personal, financial, and strategic. We talk about the levels, the performance, again, performing well, underperforming, crisis, failure. What are the key issues? Attitude, motivation, positioning. What is the external things? The competitors, customers, suppliers, right? The Pestel analysis, the trends, and what are the indicators? Gross margins, net margins, market share. What are the strategic issues? Which market are we serving? Are we able to diversify? Are we capitalizing on our ideas and turning them into opportunities? Have we got any contingency plans? And then what is our economic model? What is our business model? Is it generating revenue? Okay. So if we are in crisis or we're going through some kind of a thing, we then talk about turnaround or turnaround measures, which are actions taken to reverse this declining performance. So we talk about a turnaround strategy, okay, as the illustration suggests there. downward trend must be arrested, and we start it on an upward trajectory. So a turnaround is to transform a loss-making company into a profit-making one, but more importantly, to solve the root cause failure. The symptom might be we stop making profits, but what is the reason for not making profits or making losses? So again, you see, you have to do in order to do a turnaround, we got to do some kind of a diagnosis and think about what is the intervention. Before we can implement the intervention, we got to stabilize the company, do a strategic analysis, identify the issues, and make decisions regarding restructuring or transforming, whatever you want to call it. Excuse me. So time is an asset that we don't normally have. And that difficulty gradient says, how far down are we? How much will it take to turn us around, so to speak? And often you heard of this thing called business rescue. Companies go into business rescue, creditors force business rescue, etc. But it's not just as straightforward as it might look. It's seriously complicated. So you need a diagnosis and assessment. What are the underlying problems? Doing a SWOT analysis. You might want to restructure your finances, renegotiate terms with creditors, etc. You want to focus on efficiency and productivity to reduce cost and optimize your resource allocation. Might be hiving off certain departments, then repositioning by looking at your business model, looking at the leadership team and the culture of the organization, looking at our marketing strategies, how do we improve the experience of customers, and continuously monitoring performance, tracking the metrics, the key metrics. All the time looking for new challenges, okay? And sorting it out before it becomes another crisis. You could argue that this should have been done in the first place. Well, again, that's why we call it a turnaround strategy. And that's why it should be done all the time. The three metrics that will tell you that we're heading towards crisis. So the core focuses of the turnaround, as we said, diagnosis, intervention, stabilizing, strategic analysis, restructure decisions. But here's the thing, action. You have to have some action. Instead of complaining all the time, let's get on with what we have to do. So that you need to have a focus on management, the costs and the cash, focusing on the core business strategy and the time factor. So what are the other options then? Right? If we're talking failure or crisis or whatever, what are the other options? There's two things, harvesting and divestment. Divestment, selling off a part of the business or a profit center or a business unit. Okay? So you often hear that we want to focus on our core business and we hive off a section or a department or a division that perhaps is not our core business and perhaps is loss-making. And then a harvesting strategy is maximizing cash flow before you shut down or divest from a company. Pulling the cash out if you want. Okay, it's not necessarily a bad thing. A harvest could also be a harvesting strategy, could also be that I've set up this business, I've made money, I'm now planning to sell it off and move on. So that's a harvest, okay? So harvesting and divestment are alternative retrenchment strategies to a turnaround strategy. So harvesting is about taking out cash, divestment, selling or liquidating a part of the business. And therefore, and a turnaround strategy, remember, is about revitalization, transformation, cost-cutting, asset reduction, refocus, etc. All the things we should have been doing anyway. So harvesting or exiting is a strategic process. So you sometimes use interchangeably. Harvest emphasizes a proactive approach. Exit says leave the business. Here, aspects of harvesting: capturing the value, reducing the risk to continued operations, and looking at future options, new options. We talk about serial entrepreneurs who simply say, we started this business, it appears to be successful, there's no challenges here anymore. Move on, harvest and move on. Find something new, something more challenging, etc. So why would you harvest? Personal goals of the entrepreneur: retirement, succession, death of the entrepreneur or spouse, mental or psychological breakdown, loss of key expertise, etc. Might say, right, let's move on. And how do you that? You can sell the business to another company. Another company can acquire your business. You can go public, IPO, initial public offering. You can have that management buyback, or a company buys itself back from the owner or the owners, the investors. So you, the owner, you hold all the shares. Your management decides to sort of a reverse, not a reverse takeover. Management takes over, buys out the owner, so to speak. There's a next one: share ownership plan. Employees acquire ownership. Liquidation: systematically selling off the assets, or buyout, selling to family members or employees. So again, we come back to this thing about the venture life cycle, the stage. And you see again now, decline, when is it? So startup, growth, maturity, decline, revival, or exit. When it starts to decline, you either revive and you transform, or you exit. Now again, this is a general thing. It might be many years before you start to go into decline. But the key is to know what to look for that might indicate that it's in decline. And again, you can argue there's various reasons for that. So you see again, startup, launch, growth, maturity, harvest, or rebirth, redesign, or create a new venture. Or exit, well, we go on, go to the next generation or start another business, etc. Generally speaking. And you see sales against time. And at growth and maturity is when your sales are highest. So a harvest strategy, it's about timing, patience, having a realistic evaluation of the business, and some kind of a contractual arrangement or agreement. Now, one of the things that growth is through into an international business. So what is an international business? Do I need to tell you all that? All of you all are doing international business. Maybe there's some of you who don't do international business. So it's really about going across borders. Okay. So there's an investment strategy. There are risks like everything else, and there are benefits as well in terms of growing your market, growing your revenue, taking a long-term position, being competitive out of your sort of country of origin, or your host country, your home country rather. So how do you do that? Well, you have to analyze the market. You've got to scale consumer behavior, know what the behavior of consumers is in another country, legal and economic considerations, and don't adjust your glasses. It is looking a bit blurry. Entry strategies, cultural adaptation. Now, why do we need cultural adaptation? Because the places we choose to go to have different cultures and different consumer behaviors. So how do we go into international business? Well, you can simply stay at home and export, or you can go to another country and start off a business, buy an existing business, wholly owned subsidiary, or you can start a new business, a so-called greenfield venture. Licensing, you know what that is. turnkey projects where your expertise into setting up. And when you talk of turnkey, it means that's all the owner has to do, the new owner. You set it up and you tell them all you have to do is turn the key and start working. Management contracts, contracted manufacturing, joint ventures with an existing company in that country, and then, as I said, wholly owned subsidiaries. But all of this we do in international business. So these are the modes of entry. It can be through strategic alliances. So what's the difference between a joint venture and a strategic alliance? So a joint venture is a thing between two or more companies where you form a third new company. So MTN and Vodacom come together in a joint venture and they form Cedat Mobile, for example, and that is used to go into the DRC or whatever. On the other hand, a strategic alliance is simply that, an alliance between two or more companies, all right, in terms of how they will operate perhaps in another country. So the main benefit is that you share the risk, or you reduce the risk to each, or you share the risk, okay? However, problems often arise because who's going to run the company, what culture, the clash of cultures, etc., etc. You all know about mergers and acquisitions, licensing, franchising, etc. The least risky is the direct and indirect exporting. So what must you do? Selecting the right mode, conduct market research, clarify the objectives, evaluate resources, perform the risk analysis. So the question is, do you do this anyway if you think of starting a business in your country, or you've got a business in your country? The problem, however, that managing an international business or global business is more complicated. There are more risks involved. Okay? So, for example, the legal and regulatory challenges, customer needs, cultural risk, as we call it, or currency risk. So that you're dealing in another currency, and you might have known about MTN and their problems with the Nigerian operations and the devaluation of the Nigerian currency, etc., etc. So we talked about this, the choice of entry, exporting, licensing, franchising, etc. Here's the thing about risk and return. At the one end, low risk and low return, export, import. Go to the other end, high risk, high return, wholly owned foreign subsidiaries. You got control now in terms of a foreign subsidiary, wholly owned. In the middle, you see their licensing, franchising, strategic alliances, joint venture, foreign acquisitions, etc., or mergers with foreign companies. So again, what are the modes of entry and what are the characteristics? You can read all about this. These are some of the advantages and disadvantages. Again, you're not going to get a theory question that says discuss the advantages and disadvantages of different entry modes. You might get a scenario, a case study, an article that talks about, for example, Ocean Basket wanting to now expand to 16 countries and have their restaurants in 16 countries. So what should be the entry mode? And advise them on or evaluate the optimal entry mode, or assess the risks and then advise them on an entry mode. Now, again, there'll be no right or wrong answer there, but if you say a joint venture or something, then you have to back it up. You have to talk about the benefits and or the risks attached to that. So exporting, again, easy, relatively easy, a popular entry mode for small businesses. Sending your products into international markets. Licensing, again, letting somebody manufacture or sell on your behalf. Franchising, you all know about. Access to a franchise's proprietary business. Licensing and franchising have disadvantages. you can sort this one out yourself. Different franchising models. You see manufacturer, retailer, manufacturer, wholesaler, wholesaler, retailer, retailer, retailer. Again, this is just extra information. Then strategic alliances. Advantage, it facilitates entry. So you can't go into China and set up your business as you got it here in South Africa. You've got to enter into an agreement with an existing Chinese company. That's a Chinese law. So this helps us go into China because we're going into China with a partner that knows the local market. So we talk about complementary skills. Success of an alliance depends on the chemistry, partner selection, and building what we call relational capital, those interpersonal relationships. Strategic alliances is about collaborating, sharing the risks and resources and the profits. And again, the reasons of failure, incompatible partners. Cultural and political differences can also play a part. The reasons for joint ventures and alliances, because to buy a business might be too high. And again, you got protectionism in certain countries. So nothing too serious. Cantor in 1990. And then Omei in 1989. Again, if you did this in your assignment, you'll be told these are too old. I just want to share these with you. Key determinants of international success using joint ventures and strategic alliances. Then acquisitions, cross-border acquisitions where you buy a company in another country. So it's a bit more complicated than a domestic acquisition because you can't offer shares to the people in that country to buy that company. It's often through debt. You either use retained earnings or debt financing. In other words, you borrow money to complete the acquisition. Then we talk about mergers and acquisitions, merging two organizations. It's really a takeover by one of the other, no matter what they say. And sometimes what they call reverse takeovers, but don't stress. It's really about whether there's enough synergies and whether the joint company will be able to function better. The sum of the parts must be greater than the whole. Greenfield is when we start from scratch in another country, and it's often complex and potentially costly. And the dynamics of mode of entry. You choose a mode of entry depending on certain factors. Is it long term? Will it benefit us to set up a new company, in a new country, in another country, leading to greenfield ventures, or is it better to acquire? Is it better to license, etc.? So this is all the competencies and entry modes. The main thing that we talk about with entry modes is our ability to reduce costs. Okay, so if we're now selling more or whatever, and therefore producing more in our home country, can we produce in another country? Like the automotive industry, produce in one country and maybe sell to other countries where the transport cost might be lower than if you make your car in Japan and then send it all the way to Brazil or whatever. It could be better made in South Africa or in Europe and then sent to Brazil, that kind of thing. Maybe it's a silly example. So we see again the opportunities and outcomes of an international strategy. What is the factors influence our decision to expand internationally? How do we select the countries or regions to enter? What is our strategy? And then what is our mode of entry? And what we want is those desired competitiveness outcomes. Knowing all the time there are political, legal, or economic issues and often management difficulties. Yes, questions? Anybody? Maybe you're all sleeping. Questions, anybody?
No questions. Thank
Oh,
you.
it's a pleasure. Goodness. I'm supposed to, they tell me I must have interactive webinars. I can't have interactive webinars with people who don't want to talk to me. Lean on your other knowledge, business management 2, 3, etc. Think about international business. Don't separate this out from international business. Those of you doing international business, don't separate it out. Do whatever this thing. Look at the issues that we're talking about. So you are reminded once again about this webinar experience that you got to evaluate. Okay, so let's look at Nadine. Decline stage, not necessarily a turnaround based on decline stage, but yes, in all likelihood, that's where it starts, in the decline stage. That it might be rejuvenation, which is also a turnaround strategy. In other words, if the trend is that you're going to start making losses or you already started making small losses, okay, how do we arrest that? Again, root cause failure. What is the root cause? We've had no innovation. We're selling the same things. Our competitors have left us behind. Our revenue is down. We haven't entered new markets. We haven't produced new products. Our innovation is zero, etc. That is a sign, really. And that's why we need a turnaround at that point. Harvesting could be retrenching employees. Yes, it could be. Not so much harvesting. Harvesting is exiting the actual business, but retrenching employees could be part of that divestment. Okay. Again, it is easier said than done, given our labor laws and given the fact that you got to look for alternatives, you got to try and save jobs, people must be consulted, etc., etc. And then often the case is when I'm owing a lot of money, it's easier to go into liquidation and have my name ruined so I can open the next business in my wife's name or something like that. All right. And you know also that if your creditors push for your liquidation, for example, and there's not enough money to cover, there's not enough assets to cover the actual liabilities or the debt, the people who initiate the liquidation will then have to carry the costs of the liquidation. Of course, you'll be blacklisted as a whatever, and you won't be able to open a bank account. You'll be called insolvent or whatever. And there's a whole lot of things, and you can only rehabilitate in 5 or 10 years' time or something like that. So you often ask in interviews or you're filling out applications for finance, have you ever been declared insolvent? And if yes, are you rehabilitated? How long since you've been rehabilitated, etc., etc. Okay, for exams, can we expect long questions? I like 425 mark questions. Afraid that's not my style, Nadine. You know my style. It won't be as long as the one you had in international business on the types of globalization, for example. But certainly, articles or extracts for the, I will share, I'll put up something on the portal as an old exam paper, but they should have sent you some, or there should be some there. But I'll put up one for both international business and for entrepreneurship, so you can look at it. Okay.
Hi, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, man. Would
No,
we
that's
be
fine.
able to maybe in our next webinar, because that would be our last,
Yes.
if maybe we could choose 2 or 3 questions that we see in previous exam papers to maybe discuss so we know how to answer or the style on how to answer questions that would come up in the exam, if possible.
No problem with that. If you've got a question, then email it to me, and then I'll incorporate in the next webinar.
Jazakallah, I'll do that.
Amen.
There is
Amen.
quite a few question papers, but previous ones. So
Okay,
maybe
but
even
now,
if we just extract one or two just to
all
see
right.
the style of answering.
No problem.
Jazakallah.
Just remember that I have been the examiner now for the last 2 years or less, in fact, 1.5 years, maybe less than 1 year. Okay, so I have not been happy with some of the previous papers. They've been too much recall type questions, and like that 425 mark questions, I don't think there was enough application. I tried to encourage application and questions that where there's no real right or wrong answers. It's not just a regurgitation of what's in the study guide. Remember, this is an open book exam. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. So so if it's couple of years old, an old exam paper, I think you can use it to revise, but hey, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on it.
Thank you
However,
so much, sir.
because I'm a nice guy, I will give you all some, I won't call it a scope because this is being recorded, but yes, I will talk to you about what you should perhaps pay more attention to in the
Thank you
exam.
very much.
No, it's a
For the
pleasure.
assistance, or
It's a
even if
pleasure.
you could assist us with maybe 2 or 3 questions that
Yes, I'll do that.
are
I'll do that.
lookalikes, if we would say, because it's recorded.
Yeah, no problem.
That would be great.
But send me
Thank
the
you.
email, so I'm
I'll
okay
do
with
that. Shukran.
Amen.
I'll do that.
No problem. Okay, so Nadine, okay, let me tell you this, that the program, the program for the graduation, the booklet, the grad booklet, as we call it, that every one of you will get when you graduate. When you get your certificate, you'll also get the grad book. The grad book will have your name, and if you had 75% average over all your modules and you didn't write any subs and it was first attempt, you passed at first attempt, and you had 75% average, even if you didn't get distinctions in every module, but your average was 75 and over, you will qualify to pass what is said cum laude. Unfortunately, we don't call out cum laudes anymore. Okay, so while it will appear
Why,
in the
sir?
program, I have no idea. Maybe it takes too long because you know because you had such easy papers every year. Too many people are getting too many people are getting cum laude.
It's going to take 1 second more to say cum laude, but it's a moment in life that you'll never forget.
But
a booklet can be burnt tomorrow, but
it's out of my hands.
Or that moment in our memory would not
Agreed. Okay, make an exception for you. Okay, Nadine, let's double cross that bridge when we get to it. Shalaisen, I hope I pronounced that right. It's not 75% in the third year, it's 75% over all 15 modules that constitute the program. So an average of 75% with those caveats that you have to have written in the no supplementaries or no agrotats or whatever, written first time, main exam and passed.
And what is sum cum laude?
We don't have a summa cum laude, but a summa cum laude is generally like that average is 90% or over, I think. Yeah. But we don't have summa cum laude. Okay. But you can, however, when you come up to the stage, you can do it loudly. So then I'll say, okay, coming loudly. Okay. Maybe you can recommend it at the graduation. Salosni, we used to do it. I'm not sure what the reason was for this thing, as I said, what the reason was for not doing it anymore. I think there has been pressure, however, that it should be returned, but you'll have to just watch the space. I can't say yes, it's going to happen, or no, it's not going to happen.
Maybe only for next year you can recommend it.
Yeah.
We're protesting with every lecturer. So the pressure don't come only from us, but from every lecturer.
Okay, yes. Yeah. Some of, okay, maybe. But maybe some of your lecturers are so-called externals, so they're not full-time employees. But yes, they certainly protest or do whatever you have to do. But you'll know that you're getting cum laude. The only thing we read out is the best student or student that gets special awards. Then we'll say receives the special award or the award for the best student, or the, I don't like the word top, the best student in the Bachelor of Commerce or the Bachelor of Commerce in Supply Chain Management or whatever it is.
But we're the
You'll be
best students in all the subjects.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. So listen, yeah, it's important. Oh, goodness. All right. Now you're putting me under pressure for something that's out of my control. But hey, I'll try.
Sir?
No, it is in your control, sir, because you call out the names. So
Yeah, no,
you
I
can
do, but I don't call out
recommend
all the
it.
names, and there has to be some consistency. And if I say, if I in my turn and I call out cum laude, but you see, the card that you give me won't have cum laude. I know
We'll
it from-
write it. We'll carry a pen.
Yeah, you can write it if you want. Okay, so yeah, Kirsten, maybe that's an
Sir?
idea.
Sir, I also
When I
have a
say,
question.
Honorable Dean, I have the honor to inform you that the candidates I now present to you received the award of the Bachelor of Commerce degree. Then I'll say all of them cum laude. How's that?
Perfect. 'cause
Big
you were the
trouble.
teacher.
Big trouble. Okay. Maybe I'll get sick on graduation day. Anyway.
No.
No problem, people. Are there any questions?
Yes,
Go
I just
ahead.
wanted to ask, should we prepare more around small business startups, innovation, opportunity recognition, business planning, or more entrepreneurial strategy? And also,
dear.
will the
dear.
exam focus more on theory application or critical
No,
evaluation
application.
application?
Yeah, application. But webinar 4, I'll be able to guide you a little bit more. Remember, I don't expect you to memorize those 20 chapters or whatever. I expect
Yes.
you to be able to integrate your knowledge, and you need to prepare, notwithstanding that it's an open book exam. You need to do some preparation to know where the information is. Make
Yes.
some notes of what you think are important sections, and hopefully with my guidance, so that you don't have to now say, now look for the information and then type it in or whatever. It's simply that you know. And I always say
Also-
again, if you got a second screen, have the second screen up so that the paper is on one screen and you're looking at it all the time. Or if you got access to a printer, when you download the paper, print it without going to the next floor, or having somebody else in the room giving you the thing or whatever, and simply be able to write some notes and take your
Yes.
time reading the paper, looking at all the questions, deciding which one you want to answer first, managing your time. By now, all that should be second nature.
Yes.
I'm based in Durban, yes. This year I
Well-
traveled to Joburg in May for the grad. And unfortunately, I couldn't get to Cape Town, but there was a grad in Cape Town. And of course, the grad in Durban was the one I attended also, and called out some names.
And can I have one more question, sir?
Yes,
Are
go
there
ahead.
are there any sections in the study guide that students commonly overlook but are important for the exam?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think there's anything that's I don't think there's anything that's commonly overlooked or whatever. I think it's just the inability to see to integrate knowledge across within the module and across your modules, especially international business, but also business management 3. There's no question that there's a lot of overlap. At the end of the day, international business, for example, is all about strategy, but strategy in going beyond your borders. Some companies are born entrepreneurial, are born global, in the sense that, I'm just finding this, are born global in the sense that if you look at this particular thing,
Yes.
e-commerce opportunities That is
Yes,
just a
yes.
different mode of doing business. You don't open a physical shop, you open a virtual shop. Okay? And the same thing applies. If your server is down or your website is crashed, it's the same as your business has closed. You close the doors of your business. So again, an international business opportunity doesn't have to be that you physically go to another country. But again, we have that. Or you open an online, and most companies have a hybrid. They have a website and they do online business, but they also have a physical storefront.
Yes.
So again, this is just this thing. Maybe you can do what the Alibaba that thing does. Become a middleman and help people find what they're looking for. And that's how that guy who started that Alibaba, whatever it's called, really made his fortune. So I'd like you all to see this thing all together. But in a question, for example, there may be something where you say, a person, now you got an article or a case study of a business that's grown. You might then talk about the challenges. Then you say now he's considering going online or going to totally online. What would be the advantages? Or advise him on how to grow in businesses through a franchise, or evaluate the possibility of growing the business through a franchise. Then you can talk about being a franchisor and the advantages and disadvantages of that to you as a franchisor to grow your business. And that's the kind of things we talked about. Then I don't think you'll get a specific question on harvesting and exiting the venture, but turnaround could be something important. How do you know that's what's happening? Then the issue of the characteristics of an entrepreneur and creativity, innovation. I might give you an article and ask you to say, what characteristics do these people display that have made them successful, like you had in your assignment? Or you might be asked, X is planning to open a business, advise him on how he should finance this venture. What are the different financing options, and what are the risks, or what are the advantages and disadvantages of, and advise him on what financing he should use. Okay, so you got crowdfunding and bootstrapping and all those kinds of things we might have talked about. Again, to put it into a cohesive essay that answers the question. All right, having a look at the number of marks as well, that says how should X finance their new venture. All right, or like you had again in your assignment, is franchising entrepreneurial? You won't get that exact question, but to understand what an entrepreneurial business is. Okay, it's about this opportunity-driven process that you're constantly seeking opportunities. And then if you want, for example, in corporate entrepreneurship or within an organization, can you do the same thing? Can you think entrepreneurially within an organization, or encourage people to think entrepreneurially? Because often all of us can't be archetypal entrepreneurs. All of us can't be whoever started and is running a successful business. Some of us, and there's nothing wrong with it, will be employees. So how do you encourage employees to think entrepreneurially so that they look for opportunities for your business or for the company you work for? But I promise you, webinar 4, all right, make a note of it. What date is the last webinar, by the way? Anybody knows?
The 25th of June.
Okay, payday. All right. Trust you all won't be celebrating because it's payday. So thank you, Rita and Shalaisen. Yeah, okay. So 25th of June, we got a date, God willing, that will be able to, well, I'll be able to guide you a little bit more. Okay. I'll also be sending you all my bank details so you can do the necessary.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm also still waiting for my crowdfunding thingy, donation. But thank you. I also just have one really last question, sir.
Yes, Gav.
For a higher mark, would you recommend that we structure answers by first explaining the advantages or disadvantages, if it comes in that way, and then ending off with our own critical synthesis or reason
Yeah,
conclusion or negatives
Yeah,
and
no, so
positives, and then come
you'll
back
need
on
a synthesis of sorts, okay? But try to deconstruct the question as if they just simply ask you to assess something, okay? You don't have to give your own view. You can look at it from the positives and the negatives, and if you then want, you can put it together or whatever in terms of a synthesis at the end. But sometimes, like I saw Nadine in the assignment question, you are not asked to say whether you agree with whether franchising is entrepreneurial or not. You are given a statement that franchising is inherently entrepreneurial. Now, all you have to do was to say, yes, it is for these reasons. No, it's not for these reasons. And that's all really that's required. So again, I can't give you a general answer to that, Gav. I think you must look at each question. But don't just rush into answering things. Just think about it a little bit. Manage your time is important. Brown paper envelopes. Yeah, you see, when we used to have when we used to have venue-based exams, all students wrote in a booklet, okay? And you could put a 200 Rand note inside in the middle of the booklet or at some point of the booklet where it would never fall out. And only I would be able to find it if I opened to start marking the thing. Unfortunately, we can't do it these days. So I'm not sure what to do. Yeah, not Woolies bags, Gav. You're right. Thanks, people. Have fun. Time is over. And I shall catch up with you on the 25th of June or for international business. When is international business? Anybody? We got 2 more to do. No. 1 more for international business.
It's the 9th and the 30th.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So, hey, all right. All right. Look forward to that. The 9th is a weekday. Yeah.
So,
All right. No problem.
since we are on entrepreneurship and ending off, I would just
Yes.
like to ask why are all the opportunities so one-sided for Durban and Johannesburg and Cape Town? I'm feeling so excluded.
No, I don't think so. I think Cape Town is more of a tech hub that has really grown. For technopreneurs or guys who are in the technical side, I think Cape Town is becoming like a bit of what was that American place called Silicon Valley? Maybe not the same scale or whatever, but certainly I think there's a lot more opportunity in Cape Town. Maybe it's because everybody's so laid back and cool or whatever. There was no rate my service tonight. Really?
So I was
You
just
didn't get
referring
a...
to the entrepreneurship opportunities, all these funding opportunities, etc., etc.
Yes. Oh, Nadine, yeah, sorry, I didn't see these questions here. Franchising and licensing. No. Franchising is when you actually you let somebody use your business model as a franchisor or as a franchisee. You buy somebody's business model, okay, for which you pay a fee for, and then you pay royalties. And there's a whole lot of other conditions. A licensing is I allow you to sell my product or manufacture my products. So a long time ago, I worked in the clothing industry here in Durban, and we made Calvin Klein denim jeans under license from Calvin Klein, wherever Calvin Klein is based. Okay. If you remember, there used to be a company called Robertson Spices. It's now part of or maybe you won't remember, you all are too young. It is now part of Unilever. Robertson Spices used to make soups, Knorr soups. You know, heard of Knorr soups? Under license from a Swiss company, which is Knorr, the Knorr Group. And it was also part of what was called CPC, Corn Products Company, which was an American company. So I know this because I worked there very long ago. Okay, when you all were not even being contemplated. So that was how long ago it was. But nonetheless, it's just really about understanding licensing as an entry mode for both international business and this one. Rate my service, Nadine. I'm sure there was something there. QAMS Teams, remind you, dear student, we hope this message finds you. What? Did they have it there? There's it, yeah? It's there, reminder. There's a link. Fill out your form. Okay, the webinar experience. Okay, Deborah, you're welcome. Thank you, people. I have to go now.
Thank
Keep
you,
well.
sir.
Bye. Let
Bye.
me stop sharing here. And then thank you,
Thank you,
Senamile.
sir. Very
Makwatshwa.
insightful. Have a good
No
evening.
problem,
Thank
Gav.
you.
You're welcome. You're all welcome.
Welcome.
Alaikum salam, Yasin.
I win.
Aha. Okay, we got some new students in online. Bye. You are all welcome. All welcome. Okay, Nadine. Bye.